But John, if the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists.
I can't wait.
It's got a computer chip in it. Everything does.
Time is always against us.
Last fall, I found a Y2K Startup Disk while cleaning my office, and it reminded me that time is one of the hardest problems in computing. Well, first of all, if I just said some things that didn't make any sense, like Y2K or Startup Disk, I think you might want to listen to this podcast. So let's go.
Talking about gadgets, games, and gears. AI buzzing in your ears. Parents, teachers, kids unite. We're learning tech and doing it right. Oh, it's a tap, swipe, scroll kind of show where zeros and ones are ready to go. From old school DOS to robots that talk, we're jamming with Mr. Fred's Tech Talks.
Welcome back to Mr. Fred's Tech Talks. And of course, I'm your host, Mr. Fred, and this is the podcast where we slow technology down just enough to understand what's really going on under the hood, but not just what breaks, but why it breaks. And today's episode starts with me cleaning out my office. Last fall, as I shared before, it was a busy time, but I was going through some old boxes, and they had some computer cables, manuals, things I clearly thought I'd need someday again. And I came across a 3.5-inch floppy disk. It had a handwritten label on it, and it was labeled Y2K Startup Disk. And immediately, I was back there. The late 1990s. Computing was changing. People realizing that computers also, which are supposed to be precise, were about to get confused by something deeply human. The calendar. Well, let me pause for just a moment. Because I think, depending upon when you grew up, that floppy disk term I just threw out there might mean some very different things. So a 3.5-inch floppy disk was one of the most common ways we stored and moved data from anywhere from the 1980s all the way up into the early 2000s. Physically, it's a small square of plastic with a sliding metal shutter, and inside of it is a thin magnetic disk. And yes, it's called floppy because earlier versions were literally flexible. The 3.5-inch disk, though, was a little bit more rigid. These disks typically held a whopping 1.44 megabytes of data. Now, you might be wondering, well, how much is that really? That's less than a single photo from your phone today. It's less than a short email with attachments, and it's barely enough for a document and a small program. But at the end, this was normal. You saved your work to a floppy. You labeled it with a pen. Matter of fact, when you bought a box of floppy disks, they gave you extra labels in there. They were peel off and stick into the disk type things. And you did. You carried it carefully. Sometimes you even put them in little containers. You hoped it didn't get corrupted like by a magnet or heat or simply bad luck. And for many of us, floppy disks weren't just storage. They were transport. They allowed us to move our software from one computer to the other. Some of them carried software fixes called patches, so you would take it from computer to computer. And sometimes they were the very last thing you reached for when a computer system wouldn't boot up, because you would actually boot up from a floppy disk. So when I say this disk was labeled Y2K Startup Disk, that's not symbolic. It was likely a real contingency plan. Matter of fact, it was a real contingency plan. It was something that you'd insert if a system failed and needed to be coaxed back to life. And that's what stopped me. Because the little disk wasn't nostalgia anymore. It was evidence. Evidence of how seriously people took this thing called Y2K, or year 2000. Y2K wasn't a bug in the traditional sense. When I say bug, I mean a glitch in the software. It was a design decision. Early systems stored years using 2 digits instead of 4 digits. So instead of 2026, they would just store 26. Now you may be asking, well, why would you do that? Well, because of memory. Memory was expensive. Every little character you store in a computer takes up memory. And as I just said, memory was expensive. So if you could cut back, you did. Storage was limited, and no one expected that code would still be running decades later, which I think is funny in itself. So they had no faith in themselves, I suppose. So instead of storing, once again, 1999, systems stored 99. That works. Well, until it doesn't. When 99 rolled over to 00, software suddenly had to answer a question it was never designed to ask. Does 00 mean 2000? Or does it mean 1900? In many of the systems, the answer was 1900, which led to broken comparisons, bad schedules, and logic that no longer made sense. The risk, though, wasn't home computers. It was embedded systems and infrastructure, software that worked perfectly right until the date changed. And then the computers didn't fail because they were fragile. They failed because they were faithfully executing flawed assumptions. So people audited it, they checked it out, they inspected it, and then they patched it. So they created software fixes and then they put them into place. They tested rollovers before, Y2K, before 2000. They created recovery disks just like this one that I found. So when January 1st, 2000 arrived, most critical systems survived because people paid attention before time ran out. It almost feels like ancient history now. Y2K. People would buy food. They were buying bottles of water and keeping it in their basement. I've heard all kinds of stories. I would love to hear what your family had purchased to keep it safe just in case the world ended, I guess. But the pattern never went away. We solved a time problem by making an assumption, and then we moved on. But it's bringing us to the next one. Many operating systems, especially Unix and Unix-like systems, these are the large-scale systems, track time as the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970. In older systems, that value is stored as a signed 32-bit integer. That gives a maximum of 2,147,483,647 seconds, which just so happens to land on January 19th, 2038 at 3:14 and 7 seconds. 1 second later, the counter overflows. Time appears to jump backwards. And when that happens, systems don't always crash dramatically. They just start behaving strangely. So things like scheduled jobs being misfired, logs that track things lose their ordering, certificates look expired or not even yet valid, distributed systems lose confidence in sequence. All right. So different representation, the same class of problem as Y2K. What makes 2038 interesting is where this code lives. Not just computer servers, but routers on the network, firewalls, medical devices, industrial equipment, and Internet of Things, or IoT systems, designed to run quietly for decades. Some of these systems, they can't be easily upgraded, and they don't have room for 64-bit time because of the electronics inside of them. Or they're not actively monitored anymore. And just like Y2K, many will appear perfectly fine until they aren't. Now, it's important to say this clearly. Yes, this problem is being worked on. Most modern operating systems already use a 64-bit time, which effectively pushes this issue so far into the future that it stops being practical. Newer Linux distributions, modern Unix systems, And cloud platforms are already built with this in mind. So where the work continues is in the legacy systems. These are the older hardware that's out there, embedded devices and infrastructure that was designed to be installed once and then left alone. And just like Y2K, the real work isn't flashy. It's audits, like inspections. It's doing upgrades, a lot of documentation, and sometimes replacing systems that quietly outlived their original design. This isn't a mystery problem. It's a maintenance problem. And those are solved by people who simply pay attention. Now, if you're younger and hearing this for the first time, here's the short version. Computers don't usually break because they're broken. They break because someone took a shortcut a long time ago, and time finally caught up. Learning how computers really works really helps you spot those shortcuts and fix them. So this is why time is one of the hardest problems in computing. Not because the math is hard, but because software almost always outlives the assumptions it was built on. So I kept that Y2K disk. Not because it still works. Not because I'll ever need it again. But because it reminds me that good engineering isn't about being perfect. It's about knowing where your assumptions are and revisiting them, well, before time proves you wrong. Thanks for spending a few thoughtful minutes with me. This has been Mr. Fred's Tech Talks. And somewhere on a shelf, that floppy disk is still waiting patiently. Proof that even the smallest square of plastic can carry a lesson across decades.
Dr. Brown, I brought this note back from the future and now it's erased.
Of course it's erased!
But what does that mean?
It means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. Both of you.
We will, Doc.